Should you niche down and focus on a specific group of customers or a use case? Or should you stay broad and talk to as many people as possible, try to sell as many customer segments as possible? There is a lot of disagreement on whether you should niche down or shouldn't niche down. So today I wanted to set the record straight because the answer might be more nuanced than what you'd expect. The decision on whether to niche down or not can make you a lot of money or cost you a lot of money if you make the wrong one. So let's go through the use cases. Let's figure out whether your company should niche down or shouldn't niche down in today's episode. In niching down, you have three options. One, niching down on a specific problem that you solve, a specific use case that your customers have. Two, niching down on a specific group of customers, so solving problems for one specific customer segment. Three, staying broad and just talk to as many or try to sell to as many companies as possible, try to stay broad, try to talk to everyone. So we're going to look at each of the options with different examples from B2C, B2B and consulting standpoint. So stay tuned. This is going to be relevant for you no matter what kind of company you want to build. One Message Away podcast is a podcast on solving marketing related problems in your company, helping you connect with relevant audiences, convert them into paying customers, and becoming a leader in your niche. The podcast drops in seasons. Each season is focused on one specific topic. In the first season, we talk about how to eliminate your competition, how to stand out. Everything is supported by expert interviews, my work, my stories, my experience having worked with more than 30 companies one-on-one and more than 300 companies through workshops, helping them become leaders in their niche. Want to become a niche leader? Subscribe and get unique content to your inbox every 14 days on a Saturday. All right, so let's start with one, niching down on specific problems your customers have. So here's how this looks like in B2C, right? So let's imagine a scenario where you are forgetting your keys, for example, at home all the time. So you are in a situation where you need to go somewhere, you leave your apartment, you close your apartment door, you leave your apartment building, and then you find, oh, I forgot the keys to the office, or I forgot the keys to the car, right? So what you would need in that case is a Bluetooth tracker, an item finder that you put on your keys, right? So for example, I have mine right here, right, on the keys. So you have a Bluetooth tracker that essentially lets you know that you have forgotten your keys at home. So from the company standpoint, essentially, you do not need to niche down on a specific group of customers, because anyone who forgets keys at home, or is looking for their wallet at home, or forgets something in a restaurant, or whatever the use case. So anyone who searches for stuff is your customer. It doesn't matter how old they are. It doesn't matter what kind of preferences they have. It doesn't matter whether they're German or American. So they all have one use case. I'm searching for stuff too much. I want to optimize my time. I don't like searching for stuff. I want to know where my things are. And so that's why I need an item finder, right? Simple enough. One of the examples that I work with was called Elia. So Elia is a browser extension or a Chrome extension that helps you master your English while browsing the internet. So essentially you are learning English as you're browsing the internet. And in that case, for example, we found that we had three groups of customers. We had people who loved us and immediately converted into paying customers. We had a lot of users who didn't care, and we had a small group of users who basically our product was not for them. When we analyzed the product analytics and coupled that with user interviews, we found that there is a specific use case. So learning English for non-native speakers who want to advance their career. And we made the product for that use case. And it didn't matter whether a person was a student or whether they were 40 years old and trying to advance their career, or whether they lived in Latin America or Europe. Essentially, none of those things mattered, because we were focused on a specific problem that we solve on a specific use case. Now, same goes for B2B, right? You can make this in B2B. So you can focus on a specific problem that you're solving in B2B world as well. So for example, most of micro SaaS companies are essentially focused on a specific problem. So for example, if you have a thing like Use Aware, for example, it lets you improve your content copywriting for LinkedIn. It lets you improve your LinkedIn feed. It lets you improve your overall LinkedIn game. So that's the use case. So it doesn't matter whether you're a consultant, a CEO of a company, or a marketer in a company, an employee essentially. We can all raise our LinkedIn games using that tool, right? I worked with a SaaS company in the SEO space, for example, where that essentially we didn't know who our customers were, but we did know very well what they're trying to do with our product, because we ran multiple surveys at all times and we're getting the answers on what the clients essentially want to do with our product. And so we knew what their goal was, we knew what their use case was, and that was enough essentially to grow from 1 million to 3 million, because it was the only sort of data that we needed to scale that company, right? Because we were positioned around a use case, because we were positioned around the problem. We were solving one problem really, really well, and we were solving it for multiple customers. Now, same goes, for example, for consultants. So at one point, I was just focused on being positioned as a positioning specialist. So, I can help you in B2C, I can help you in B2B, I can help you whatever, right? I can position competitor to McDonald's if you wanted to, right? So I am focused on one specific problem. If you have a positioning problem, you can come to me. So that was a while ago, but it's still a very, very good way to start, because you are focused around the thing that makes you valuable. So for me, it was positioning companies. For you, it might be, digital marketing strategies. It could be content writing, copywriting, whatever. And you are only focused on that. And so it can be easier to create content around that. And you don't yet know who your best fit clients are. And so essentially you are targeting multiple customer segments, but through a specific use case. So they all have the same problem, and it's easier to build your experience that way, and it's easier to build your portfolio that way. So what are some of the pros of being positioned on a specific use case or solving a specific problem? Oh, one, your positioning stays kind of wide, right? You're not limiting yourself to a specific target segment, so it's safer. Essentially, in the beginning, it's safer, right? That's why it's really useful for early companies to essentially get the data in. So if you're in an early stage startup, or a consultant or someone who's starting out their career, essentially it's easier for you to build experience through that. Essentially just seeing, okay, my methods work really well for creative agencies, but they do not work well in tech, or the other way around, right? This allows you in the beginning to get multiple customers and figure out what's right and what's wrong. So I mentioned the Elia example earlier on, and they were positioned in the beginning, for example, we were positioned in a specific use case, and that's how essentially they got their clients in. So people who were looking to learn English, that was their initial positioning. And so we got a variety of clients, and if we didn't do that, we basically we wouldn't have the data, right? So because we had the data, we were able to analyze the data and figure out who our best fit customers are, and then essentially position for them, right? So next, we're going to be talking exactly about that. So typically, being positioned on a use case is the first sort of part of building the company. It's better for early stage companies. So companies that make up to $1 million a year. And why that is because after a certain point, you are leaving money on the table. And that is because essentially people pay more for specialized solutions. It doesn't really matter whether you're selling a service or you're selling, your software online. Essentially, people like paying, or they pay more for specialized services, right? So if you're a consultant who is not specialized in anything specific, you're going to be stuck in freelancer mode. So you're going to be stuck in, I'm a copywriter, but I write copy for all kinds of clients, right? I'm not going to choose you over someone who is specialized in, tech or whatever, if I have a tech company, right? So I'm always going to be willing to pay the specialist who is specializing in my kind of industry more than a generalist who knows about my industry but doesn't have as much experience in it because he's not specialized for it, right? So that means that you have higher cost of user acquisition and lower conversion rates than if you were niche down on a specific customer segments. So it's also like more difficult to build a portfolio of the same clients. So showing your expertise in certain industry, right? So it's difficult. It's more difficult to sell, especially high ticket. And same goes for software. For example, if you have a SaaS, if you have a tech product, if it's perceived as the authority in the field because of the experience, because of the how it works, because of better features or whatever, or more suited features to a specific customer segment, for example, people do tend to pay more for those kinds of features. All right, so let's look at how niching down on a specific audience looks like. Niching down on a specific audience essentially means that you have a specific target group in mind and you're solving certain problems for them much better than anyone else on the market, right? So as an example, in B2C, when I was working at my last startup, Kobi, we had a mobile app for dyslexic children who are learning to read, and all of our services were specifically designed for dyslexic children. So that means that our mobile app, which was our primary product that we were selling, but everything else around it, our communication, our for example lead magnets, our newsletters that were sent out, were all specific to children aged 5 to 8 with dyslexia, simply because those are our primary targets. And that doesn't mean that we didn't have other people in the app. We certainly did, but most of our high value people were actually, or high value clients were actually moms and parents of dyslexic children. So now we can, because we're designed specifically for a specific target segment, and same goes for B2B, for example, we can now talk their language, right? We can now know these customers really well. We can talk to them essentially like we really know them, or like we're part of, basically we're joining the conversations that are already happening in their minds, right? And so that's how essentially we improve the conversion rates, and that lowers the cost of user acquisition as well. Same goes for consultants, right? So I mentioned, for example, my case where I was positioned as a positioning specialist working with anybody. Now I work with tech only, right? So essentially I am a positioning specialist, but only for tech companies. So if you have a tech company, I can help you out. I can help you out better because I have more experience with tech companies, so I can help you out better than I could help a McDonald's competitor. So some of the pros of niching down on specific customer segments is that essentially you become a niche leader. You become perceived as the authority in the field. And that typically is, the preferential path of doing things in both in B2C and B2B after sort of $1 million in revenue, because you can analyze the data and make an informed decision on who to niche down on. So what's your best fit target segment, right? Because if you do it too early, you might essentially kill your sales, because you might, you don't have the data to make an informed decisions, and so essentially you block off a good revenue path. But if you do it when you have the data, so a company making $1 million, $5 million, $10 million a year, they can take the data, they can make an informed decision. Okay, these are people who are bringing in a lot of money. So how can we position for them? How can we become the authority in the field? How can we become niche leaders? And by becoming niche leaders, essentially you're then getting 70% of the deals, right? Because the stronger your authority presence is, the less your competitors will be relevant. Essentially, by being an authority in the field, you are making the competition completely irrelevant, because studies found that both in B2C and B2B, by the time you are doing research on, purchasing something, being a B2B software or headphones, when you're doing the research, you already have in mind what you want to buy. All the other options are there just to make sure that you're making a safe choice, just to make sure that you didn't miss anything, right? And so in B2B, for example, most CMOs that come to the demo calls, they already have a product that they want to go with in mind, but they still do 3 to 5 demo calls so that they make sure that they've made the right decision. And the same goes for B2C. So you want to be positioned, you want to be niche down on a specific target audience. You want to become a niche leader. Now, another option is essentially staying wide, right? So having a really wide positioning and just trying to sell to anyone. Most of the agencies do that. Most of consulting companies do that. Most of the software development companies do that. And that essentially means dying a slow and painful death, because you become a generalist, because you become a commodity. And once you become a commodity, the only way to compete is on price. And if you start to compete on price, there is always going to be someone who's willing to do it cheaper, right? For the US is Europe, for Europe is Asia. Like, there is always going to be someone who will be prepared to essentially do your work cheaper. So quickly, what we talked about until now, and in the next step, I'm going to go into some advanced level niching down. But generally, early stage companies should focus on solving a specific problem. We're going to see that. We're going to be talking to Matic in one of the next episodes. You're going to see exactly how they did it, how they grew their company from 0 to $500,000 a year. Generally, more established companies making 5 million, 10 million in revenue, they should niche down on a specific customer segments if the financials show that a large target segment, large target audience essentially makes them the most money, right? Or makes them a large portion of the money. Same goes for consultants. I made a mistake of niching down too fast, and I essentially killed my sales for the first, few months. After that, after I saw the mistake and after I essentially positioned myself in the early stage on a use case, so positioned as a positioning specialist, if you will, I started getting clients again. And then I niched down once I had the data of who I best work with. But I had a case, and this is the advanced lesson here. I had a case, for example, in B2C segments where we, with one of the leaders in the market, we essentially kept our brand broad so we could target different segments, but then we used actual products to make verticals. So essentially our products were specific to a specific target group, right? So if you were in group A, you got product A. Essentially, we targeted our product A with all of the communication, with how the product looked, how the product felt, all of the communication around the product, all of the systems around the product. We targeted that at the group at the target audience A. If you were a target audience B, we did a new product that was specifically designed for the group B, and so on. So essentially, you can keep the brand broad, and then you can create verticals, or you can niche down with specific products. But you cannot do that essentially before, let's say, 10 million in revenue, simply because you're not going to have the money and the manpower to keep all of that alive. If you're making less than 10 million a year, you should niche down on a specific customer segment, essentially building systems for that specific segment so that you can scale that segment into something really profitable. So that's it. That's all about niching down. Generally, early stage companies focus on a specific use case. The bigger you get, the more data that you get. Take a look at the data. If the data shows that you have some customer segments who are better than other customer segments, focus on them, provide them the best value so you can create processes specifically for them, and you can essentially maximize their monetization. As always, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like. Let me know what you would want to see more of. Do like, do subscribe, click all of the buttons. Do share with your friends. If you have, CMOs who would want to, or who would benefit from this. If you have CEOs, CPOs, CTOs, do share with them the podcast. Have them subscribe, and you'll get an email every 14 days on a Saturday to your inbox, essentially with content like this. May your customers love you and understand your products.